Before we dive in, I just want to gently acknowledge that today's conversation touches on some heavy themes. We talk about cancer, the medical system, and the experience of facing illnesses while living far from home. If today isn't the day where you can hold that kind of conversation, that's completely okay. You can save this episode for another time or listen with someone you trust. What happens when the life you've built abroad, with the dream, the career, and the family, is suddenly interrupted by the one word no one is ever prepared for? Welcome back to Damn Parenting. I'm your host, Eva, and today we're talking about navigating cancer in the Netherlands and the woman who decided that being an international shouldn't mean being alone in the dark. Today's conversation is about cancer, but more than that. It's about the intersection of illness and identity. It's about navigating a medical system that isn't your own across a language barrier and while doing something terrifying without your village nearby. If you are an expat, an immigrant, or an international parent here in the Netherlands, this episode is for you. Today I'm joined by Catherine, the founder of Cancer Support Netherlands. This charity was built specifically for English speakers navigating the Dutch system. Take a breath before you listen. This is a tender one, but it is also powerful, practical, and deeply community-led. Catherine, welcome to Damn Parenting.
Thank you so much. I'm really happy to be here.
Well, Catherine, I'm so glad you're here as well. But before we talk about the incredible work that you're doing right now, I do want to go back a bit. Can you tell us a bit about yourself, like where you're from and what originally brought you to the Netherlands?
Sure. So I'm Catherine and I'm 49. I'm from Scotland originally, but I've been here in the Netherlands for almost 20 years. And if I were having a conversation with a Dutch speaker right now, they'd say, "Oh, so you speak good Dutch then?" But the truth of the matter is, I still prefer to navigate the world in my mother tongue, English. I'm also a mum. I've got two children. They're 20 years old and 16 years old. And one's already flown the nest, the other one's still at home. Amongst all that, I'm also a lawyer. That's my career, that's my training. I moved over to the Netherlands just after the financial crisis in 2008. I've worked in financial services all my life. And I guess, it was also the point where my partner and I were working out, well, where should we be? And since London during the financial crisis was a pretty tricky place to be for a lawyer who worked in financial services, we said, all right, let's go and try Amsterdam. My now ex-husband has been here for a lot longer than me, so this was a safe place for him. And of course, it's become my home over time as well. And well, I guess I'm now also a breast cancer survivor 2 times over.
So you mentioned there that you've been here for 20 years, but you have a 20-year-old and a 16-year-old.
Yeah.
So because we all have that like expat dream or international or immigrant dream, what did normal look like for you as an international parent here? And what were your dreams that you were going to be building upon here in the Netherlands?
What a fantastic question. Um, well, I think everyone moves with the concept of, I think specifically when you come to somewhere like the Netherlands, I think we all have a bit of an idea of, well, they're the happiest children in the world. So, of course, we'll create this fabulously happy childhood. And don't they all look so kind of calm and chilled as they whiz around on their bikes? Multitasking exercise and commuting at the same time, And yeah, I think seriously speaking, I was probably thinking I would have more work life balance, coming from big city London to Amsterdam. I thought, yeah, I'll be able to spend more time at home with the kids. I'll probably have a better work life balance and I will be raising happy children in the international village, which is Amsterdam.
So it sounds like you actually had a clear path ahead of you with a great plan, but then everything did change for you. Would you like to share your personal cancer story with us?
Yeah, of course. So I guess I had two big upsets because I did end up getting divorced actually 4 years after I first moved here. And so I think some of those ideals that I had around family certainly changed because I suddenly had to navigate the Netherlands as a single parent. And maybe through that story, I learned the value of community because I raised my children without my family nearby. And so, these wonderful people that we meet as internationals living in a foreign country, I think for many of us, they become our family. They're your chosen family. And so I just wanted to say that because if I think about life events, that was a big one. And that was a long time ago now. That was about 14 years ago. And then I think the second really big life event that I've been through since I've been here was my diagnosis of cancer. And that happened for the first time in 2022. And I think, being diagnosed with cancer is very efficient here in the Netherlands. You pop along to the GP. And in my case, I said, hey, I'm really worried. I can feel something in my breast. And my dad had just died that year. You do see that sometimes people have these major life traumas and then cancer can come quite soon afterwards. Anyway, I went to the doctor and I said, look, I'm in so much grief about the death of my dad. I actually don't know if I can cope with this if it is cancer. A GP was super sympathetic, but said, okay, I've got to get you into the hospital. I went along to the hospital and they have something called speed diagnosis. And what that means, it's super efficient. But, I walked into my first room and I had a mammogram and there was one person. And I walked into another room for an ultrasound. First of all, there were two people, then there were three. Then I was told I needed a biopsy. Someone else joined. And then I was sent out into the world for 60 minutes whilst I waited for the result of the biopsy. I had an amazing friend with me, Irish, absolutely lovely. And she did her best to distract me for 60 minutes as we walked around New Sloten. And then we walked back into the room. And I always say that I knew as soon as I looked at the nurse's face, I knew that they were going to tell me I had cancer. And that's what she said, She said, I'm very sorry, but you have cancer. And it felt like all of the air was sucked out of the room. And I was just in this white space. And the first thing I thought about, of course, was my children. And the first thing you think is, will I survive? And from that moment on, life is never the same, although you really hope it will be. you know? And then, yeah, you're on a very different life experience. And as an international, I would say it's probably harder than as a Dutch national. And that's for a few different reasons. First of all, the medical language is not our everyday language. But when that's also being translated or spoken in Dutch, that's just double complicated because there's a few additional barriers going on. Then, of course, you're navigating a healthcare system that you're probably not familiar with, certainly not your home healthcare system. You're navigating a health insurance system that you absolutely have no idea about. And perhaps you just don't know anyone else who's been through this same journey. And that was the case for me. I walked into that room as Catherine, mum, sister, friend, loves going out with her friends, having a good time, lawyer. And I walked out being told I had cancer, and I just could not wrap my head around that one at all. And I felt very, very alone for all of the reasons that I've just explained to you.
So that was the appointment where you found out.
Yeah.
How did it go with your children?
Yeah, that's a conversation you don't want to have. And I'm not good at pretending. A lot of people deal with this in different ways. Some people really don't want to talk to their friends and family about what they're going through until they don't have any choice. I'm probably on the other end of the spectrum. I felt I had to tell them, and I was maybe in the fortunate position that my children are a bit older. They were 15 and 12 then, because that was my first diagnosis. And yeah, that was a very hard conversation. And we sat down on the sofa together because I wanted them to be close to me, and I broke the news. And of course, at the moment of diagnosis, you don't know. You don't know whether you're stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, stage 4. You don't know what kind of cancer you have. You don't know what your treatment's going to be. You just have this big, scary word that is cancer. And that was so hard to tell them because I couldn't answer the questions that they had, and my kids each had a different response. My 15-year-old daughter, it was a bit like, well, sorry to say, but this is highly inconvenient. You know, this actually is a moment where I'm being a 15-year-old girl and I want to be out there living my life. And now you're showing up with this cancer. What's that all about? But of course, that is just the instinctive response because it's too much for a teenage mind to understand really, or to really know what that means. And I remember she said to me, Mum, it's not going to be like it is in the movies. I have to tell you, it was like it is in the movies, you know, and so that was just a journey that we had to go through together. And then my son, he's quite a different character. He was younger, but also perhaps a bit more introverted. And it was a real emotional shock for him. And so he was actually the one that went faster to, I'd say, tears and what you kind of expect, which is that, let me hold you. Now, this is a lot of words to say. It was really tough. And I feel so sad that my children have gone through this. I would do anything to take it away from them. I really would.
You mentioned there about how once you get the diagnosis, you have no idea what the plans are going to be or what the treatment's going to be.
Yeah.
Can you just let us know what was your treatment in itself and how long did it take and what was the outcome?
Yeah, the system's very efficient. It runs on protocols. Sometimes you wish it didn't. Yeah. I always say it's a bit like you've gone into a very efficient factory and you're just put on a sorting line. So, okay, Catherine, she's stage 2 to 3, HER2 positive breast cancer. According to that medical diagnosis, she will need 18 rounds of various different chemotherapies. Then there will be a lumpectomy or a mastectomy, depending on personal preference. That's not always the case, and potentially radiation. And through that process, there will be scans, checkups, and we're just going to get on the train or the factory line, however you want to think of it. And you'll get off the other end and we'll see where we're at. At every point in that journey, I just wanted someone to tell me I was going to be okay. And of course, the medical system can't do it. You know, it's potential liability for them, but you just want someone to hold you and tell you it's going to be okay. And I think, that human connection, that's the piece that the system can't give you. And I think that's the thing that can make you feel very isolated. And it's also the thing that actually your friends and family can't give you because they love you and they want to help you and they want to connect with you, but they're not walking in your shoes. And that's where I really felt a lack actually of a new community. And that was, other cancer patients and survivors. So you asked me how I am now. I've been very lucky actually on my journey, kind of lucky, unlucky. So at the end of my first round of treatment, I was told I was no evidence of disease anymore. And so I was offered the opportunity to participate in a trial where it didn't have radiation. And I decided to do that because I really felt, well, if I can help other people with my journey, I should do that. Hindsight is a beautiful thing. I now wish I'd had the radiation, but statistically, it seemed like I didn't really need it. And so I guess that leads me on to what happened to me over the course of 23, 24, which is that on my first scan, it showed that there were a couple of spots in my original scar tissue. And I then had 12 months of uncertainty because the hospital couldn't tell me whether that was cancerous or not. And so eventually I went back to the UK actually to be biopsied. And that's where I discovered that I did have cancer for the second time.
Wow, you went back there to get it done.
Yeah, I did. And I say that with no disrespect to the Dutch health system, but because of the protocols and these spots in my scar tissue not growing, the hospital, they kept saying, well, we just have to wait and see. We just have to wait and see, and well, I couldn't live like that in the end. And so eventually I paid for my own MRI in the UK and got a biopsy there and found out I had cancer again. And I guess, I think this is a really important message or feeling that I have now is that we all need to advocate for ourselves. It's really important. And when you're in the medical system, it's easy to feel that you're just a number or that you are just going with yet another small concern, or, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. If I had an important thing to say, it would be trust your intuition and go the extra mile, even when it feels like it's a bit awkward. Just do it because it's your health, that's on the line. So I went back, I got diagnosed again in the UK, and I came back and they did a PET CT. I mean, of course, they were horrified that they'd missed all of this. And they did a PET CT, and unfortunately, during that period, the cancer had metastasized. And so I went from a stage 2 to 3 cancer patient to a stage 4 cancer patient. And I discovered that on Boxing Day of 2024. And my first response was a lot of anger, because I'd been fighting, of course, for this diagnosis. And I didn't feel I'd been listened to. And all my worst fears had come to be reality. And well, then I realized, hey, I don't know how long I have to live, because nobody could give me a prognosis. But whatever I have, I want to do something with this experience that I've had. And what I had discovered through my journeys was that there was no community out there. There was no English speaking community for people who are not from the Netherlands to navigate this journey of cancer. And there had been a few things, but they were all out of date, and that's really demoralizing, by the way, when you're looking for help and the thing doesn't exist anymore. So I thought, this cannot just be a me problem. There must be other people going through this. So I just popped a message on Facebook, because that's my age. Is anyone else going through cancer and looking for a cup of tea? And from that small message, we started to create a community. And I have to say, through my second cancer journey, which just ended in December of 2025, which was another 6 rounds of chemo and another surgery and, more radiation. I did have radiation this time. I had proton therapy, actually, and a lot of immunotherapy. Having community, having other people beside me has really made a difference in my journey. And with many thanks to whoever is in charge in this universe, I am now cancer-free again. And so I'm in a very small percentage of people who are lucky enough to be stage 4, but being treated with curative intent. And I'm so thankful to be here, to be alive, and to be talking to you today.
That's incredible, your story. I was going to ask you that I know you've built something that is bridging this gap. I did want to ask about the Dutch system, because it's known to be world class, but I was going to ask, where does it fall short for those of us who didn't grow up here? But the reality is you just took things into your own hands and you went back and said, I'm going to advocate for myself, which is honestly, I think every discussion I've ever had on here, if it's through pregnancy or birth or raising your kids, like, you really have to advocate for yourself here in every single way, which it adds on so much of a layer onto what we're already going through here. So I can only imagine what you were having to go through in your own mindset, and having to then do all of that work and come back here and show it to the doctors to say you missed it.
It was crazy. And, I'm very conscious that indeed this is an amazing country to live in, right? And the healthcare system is amazing. But I do think that there are cultural differences which it's hard to navigate. I think that Dutch culture really is let's just get on with it kind of a space. And we all know the jokes about paracetamol and nose spray. And so I think there's a cultural piece here, but I think there's also a piece around the way that the system is set up. Fundamentally, everything is about money. And we're all paid for by our health insurance, which means that protocols are applied that work for the health insurers and work for the hospitals, and fundamentally probably also big pharma. So, it's an interesting system to navigate. And I think you do need to advocate for yourself. And just in the community, it's something that's talked about over and over again. Just don't give up. Just keep on going. Keep on asking the questions. I think I've probably got a little label on my file that says difficult patient, but I don't mind it being there because it saved my life. So it's okay. And I have to say, in the defense of my hospital, I have followed up with them according to their internal policies, and they have various committees. My case was considered a calamity and reported to the healthcare authorities here. But I've also followed up with them in their internal complaints, and they have said, well, we will take your case and use that as an example for other people. But of course, nobody wants to be the case that's used as an example. You just don't want to be there.
So I want to dig into the practicalities here. So if someone
Sure.
is listening and feeling overwhelmed, how do you provide the emotional safety net with Cancer Support Netherlands? Or is it just a place where they can finally just be vulnerable in their own language? Or tell us a bit about the Cancer Support Netherlands.
Yeah, so we're a Dutch not for profit, we're a Dutch charity. And the charity is really there to support the community, which I guess has grown from me and a dear friend who I had my first cup of tea with last year to now over 130 people from all over the Netherlands, all different types of cancers, different genders. Some people just been diagnosed, some people in remission for 10 years, but still with a need to come together to connect about their experience after they were diagnosed with cancer. And of course, are living here in the Netherlands. Our mission is to create connection at the heart of every cancer journey. And what does that mean? Well, I think it means that while the medical system is doing its job, which is very important, we are here to provide the peer to peer support, the social connection. Let's call it the kind of beating heart of humanity, as the medical factory does its job. In real terms, that means that we connect with each other virtually via a couple of different platforms. That's WhatsApp and Facebook private page. Then we connect together once a month in meetups. We have education sessions, we have walk and talks, we have let's have a cup of tea and a slice of cake, getting back to our roots. You form friendships, you take advice. Well, I should be careful. It's not advice. It's people just sharing their experiences. We definitely don't get involved in anything medical. Yeah, that's what we are. They call us psychosocial. We're a community. We're people coming together to support each other through a really, really hard time in their lives. And it's not just people, from the UK. It's people from many different countries. But the thing that brings us together is that everyone feels most comfortable sharing their experiences in English.
And it's not always just about the patient, though. As you mentioned, your own kids, it's the partners, and even workplace.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you have like a ripple effect, like supporting the parents or the children, or even a way
Yeah.
to explain to our children how we're meant to talk about this?
Well, we're we're early stage. And I think there are so many pieces of this puzzle and you want to solve them all, but you can't do it. So what we've done is we started with what I'm going to say is the core, and that's the patients. And the next piece we've just started to try and solve or help with is family and friends. We're not yet at the stage of being able to, provide guidance to people when they're talking to their kids. But you can, of course, come and talk to other people who've been through the experience of talking to their kids. And maybe you meet someone who's got kids of a similar age or of a similar kind of characteristic, and you can learn from that other person who's been through it. I love the idea, by the way, though, that of bringing a psychologist on board, and there are certainly some who are interested in working with us who could take a more active role in that. So thank you so much. That is a brilliant idea. Writing it down.
And as you just mentioned there, you've actually grown. It's only been a year and you've already grown from just yourself and your friends with a cup of coffee or a cup of tea to now 130. So if someone is actually listening to this right now and they want to participate, they want to volunteer, they want to help you scale this, if it's HR or volunteers or a psychologist or whoever it might be, what does the next 3 years look like for you guys?
Our goal is this connection at the heart of every cancer journey. There are 10,000 internationals diagnosed with cancer who are living in the Netherlands every year. That's a huge number.
Wow.
Our goal is to be the name that the oncologist or the GP or the oncophysio or the psychologist or your work colleague or your dear friend says, "Oh, I am so sorry to hear that you're going through this," whether that's as a patient or as a family or friend or supporter, what we want is for them just to say, "There's an organization, it's called Cancer Support Netherlands. Why don't you go and see what they can do to help you?" That's our goal, is reach people and then continue to roll out what we already have in place, which is this peer-to-peer support, is the community. We currently have a hub in Amsterdam and in The Hague. The goal is to really have hubs in the other major cities in the Netherlands. So we're hoping to create a community in Eindhoven next. We know there's a lot of big international companies down there, and I think there's a real need. We're in touch with a Dutch organization called IPSO, Centrum de Eik in Eindhoven, and we'd like to start running meetings there. So really it's about embedding ourselves in major Dutch cities so that there's a place that people can go where they can talk to people who are on the same journey as they are, and to feel that they are not alone, because I felt so alone, and I don't want that for anyone else.
I mean, it's incredible what you've built in just a year. And I'm thrilled to hear that in that year yourself, you are now in remission yourself. And yet you've now
Yeah,
been helping up to
amazing.
130 people, which I think is phenomenal in just 1 year. So congratulations
Oh,
to you and thank you as well. And thank you for joining us here. Is there anything you would like to leave, just a comment you want to leave at the end of this, just for anyone who's listening who might be going through it or might have a
mm.
partner or a relative?
The first thing I'd like to do is actually just thank you to everyone who's worked with me on this. It's not me doing it alone. We have amazing volunteers, and those numbers grow by the day. And anyone who'd like to volunteer us and help us with this mission, please go to www.cancersupportnetherlands.nl and click the volunteer button and come and join us on this mission. To anyone who's listening to this, please just remember our name. You might not need us right now, but maybe you're at the water cooler at work, or you're on the bus and you hear someone talking about this. Maybe it's you going through your journey. Cancer isn't something that's defined by age. We have all ages in our community. Just remember our name and come find us. Hey, and maybe come follow us on Instagram so that you know where we are in the future. And our handle is cancer_support_Netherlands. And you can also Google and find us.
Thank you so much, Catherine. And indeed, all the information will be shared in our show notes and on our Instagram. If this episode brought up something for you, pause, breathe. Cancer is not something anyone chooses, but community is. And if you are navigating this journey in the Netherlands, you're not weak for needing any help, but you are brave for reaching out. And to the partners, the employers, and the friends listening, this is your reminder that support spaces matter before the crisis hits. So if you never need this resource, share it anyway, because someone in your circle will. This is what Damn Parenting Podcast is about. Not just about playdates in schools, but it's about building villages for the unspoken and the hardest parts of life abroad. You're not doing this alone.